awesomes. It's Regina coming to you post-election, but pre-final results on AWE Radio from my ABCD PNRM Talkcast. Shh. Let's talk about getting it together. Today, I'm having a midterm election conversation with my guest, Miss Eleanor Murky. And the it today is red wave fizzled and the flag of democracy was still there. We are 10 days past Election Day, November 8th, and what is known is much about offices won and organizational constructs and control achieved. But for as much information that's been settled, there's just as much still in limbo. How the wins move us forward, and the losses cause the losers to look at what they stood for and where the country stands to make course correction or not. What that decision means or looks like to democracy in the long run is where we go from here. More obstructionism, political violence, election denial, and lies are working to move back to a position of parties which are believers in democracy and the rule of law, but have ideologies which allow them to arrive at the same point from a different perspective and leaves room for discourse and compromise. Remember the three scenarios I posited before? I was remiss in not considering a fourth, which is where we find ourselves post-election. I'll restate them to give context to the fourth. One, things remain as they were. Dems retain control of both chambers of Congress, the House, considered the lower chamber, and the Senate, considered the upper chamber. At minimal operational levels, accomplishing what they could with narrow seat leads and little or no support from the GOP. From most agenda issues set forward to benefit the people of the country. State and local political norms would be upheld, repudiating the candidates' non-democracy supporters. The result? Democracy would have been very much solidified and MAGA Republicans' autocracy desires for the country clearly rejected. Democracy working, but minimally. Two, democracy saved. Lower chamber, the House retained. Upper chamber, the Senate control is increased to 52 seats, giving the Dems greater ability to pass substantive legislation to improve the operation of the Congress and shore up major holes in democracy issues. State and local political norms would be upheld, repudiating the candidacies of non-democratic supporters. Results, democracy would have been strengthened and maximized for the benefit of the president's agenda. Democracy working, saved, and autocracy averted. Three, this is either the beginning of the end, democracy lost, or the end of the beginning, the attempt to change our democracy to an autocracy. Republicans win control of both chambers of Congress, House and Senate, at minimal operational levels, striving to obstruct everything and impeach or hold hearings for everyone in the current administration that investigated or held 45 accountable for its wrongdoings. MAGA Republicans, election deniers, and democracy obstructionists on the right at state and local legislature and government office levels are elected and therefore duly empowered to control state elections and operations as they see fit, changing them in favor of their personal beliefs and ideologies. Result, MAGA Republicans' autocracy desires for the country would have been supported and democracy would have been very much impaired and fractured. Democracy is fragile, not what it once was, and autocracy is impending. Now, while the three scenarios were valid, they assumed all or none results for one ideology or the other. Success of one facet of a win while losing another is also a possible result for Democrats or Republicans. Democracy or autocracy. It was short sighted of me, and I will correct my oversight here today because this fourth scenario is where we find ourselves as a result of the midterms. That is, split control of Congress. As of research gathering, the lower chamber is very likely going to be controlled by Republicans, and the upper chamber, the Senate, has already been won by the Democrats. State and local races were much less harmful to democracy than polled or reported by strategists. The red wave, total thumping of Dems by GOP, didn't happen, and the most dangerous election deniers, conspiracy theorists, liars, and perpetrators of misinformation were defeated. Though many elected in non-battleground states of no consequence. Result, this mixed outcome results in democracy taking a hit that requires attention to what is happening with the MAGA right and action on the left to keep it to the forefront and strengthen it. Democracy working, saved, and autocracy put on its heels, not impending, but still being pushed by MAGA Republicans, but not to the magnitude projected. Having set the stage and gotten us on stable footing, everyone, please welcome Ms. Eleanor Murphy, Coalition for REM, which is Voter Registration, Education, and Motivation of Lake County, Illinois, and she's also CEO of Murph Resources, to the podcast. She and I will take a look at the state of the election and country and provide context and our thoughts on where we go from here and what stands in our way. Eleanor, here's where we are post-election. The Senate, 49 GOP, 48 Democratic. Two others who normally vote with the Democrats. So that's 50 to 49 with one Democratic seat, the one from Georgia, in a runoff to be held on the 6th of December. House, at time of research, was 219 to 206 in favor of the GOP, with a projection of 221 GOP and 213 for the House, for the Democrats. Governor's races were of a similar nature in that 17 with GOP, with 18 going Democratic, with no elections required for 8 Republicans and 6 Democrats, making it just about even with 25 Republican and 24 Democratic governors. The projection for at the end is there would be 26 to 24 in favor of the GOP. Eleanor, as previously mentioned, the midterm red wave projected by the right and touted by pundits and strategists across the country, both GOP and Democratic, was never realized. In fact, President Biden's win surpassed any in recent history, making the Republican showing in the midterms the worst in modern history. Their successes were barely sufficient enough to take control of the House and hold on to many seats in state and local elections to push forward MAGA positions in insignificant jurisdictions where impacts are minimal. Democracy was the winner. Question: Eleanor, why do you think Dems and democracy won out over what was normal reaction in the midterms to a poor approval rating of the incumbent president?
Oh, okay. Um, I think one of the things that, to your question, had a lot to do not only with the president's negativity across the voting spectrum, but the Supreme Court's decision with the birth control. And I think also there are people that quietly but disagreed or disapproved of the January 6th invasion of the Capitol, had a lot to do with the turnout not being exactly what the Republicans thought they were getting. Because one of the things, let me just deal with the House for a minute. When you look at the fact that the Dems uh, will probably lose about 7 or 8 seats in the House, you have to think about the gerrymandering that was done in Florida, where the way they changed it around gave the Republicans just in that one state 4 additional seats, where it once, was Democrats and a couple of Republicans. And then up in New York, there was a little tricky thing that happened where a judge this is outside of New York City now, upstate New York, made a decision that gave the Republicans another 4 seat advantage. So when you look at those two moves, automatically you can see the flip in the House that was done, because that's why DeSantis was walking around pretty proud of what he did in Florida. But then that judge decision up in New York really sort of made it an uneven thing for the Democrats, flipping those 8 seats before there was even an election.
So it was pre-designed for the Republicans to have at least a 7 seat advantage, and it was to them to win those seats, which they did.
Yeah.
And it accounts for the a 7 seat advantage that is projected for them in their attempt to win the House. Is that correct?
Yes, because they had 8 seats, and if they only got 7, that's a interesting thing, since it was designed for the 2 states to bring in 8 new Republican districts. But I think even in a lot of the Republican areas, people were really hitting a disapproval of things that were being done, constitutionally wise, and the Supreme Court with its amazingly, I mean, the most one of the most conservative courts that we've had in terms of, before a lot of times it was other issues that they were dealing with, with the dark money in politics, issues with slavery, with the Dred Scott case. But this time, the ruling and how it was acted out on the abortion was just a little too far.
Well, they've been preparing the GOP or the right for stacking the Supreme Court to do just what they did, and that's been for over the last 50 years. Just waiting
Absolutely.
patiently to make sure that they could get the bodies on the Supreme Court so that they could take it over. Even though all those justices that just came onto the court, all the way back to Roberts, actually had to ask the question of the primacy or the settled law surrounding Roe versus
Wait,
Wade, and they all said can't touch it. But what did they do as soon as the opportunity arose?
they touched it.
They touched it. Absolutely.
Yeah, because after all, they were not under any kind of oath when they were at, they, sort of. I can't remember
They were,
quite, but
yeah, they
they,
were
yeah,
absolutely,
they were.
yeah.
Um,
But
but
they phrased it in such a way
yeah,
that they skirted, they said it, but they never ever committed not to doing it. That they just said it shouldn't be or settled law, and you accept it. You don't deal with it,
yeah,
but never really said that they wouldn't.
yeah.
Moving on. Excuse me.
No, I was going to say, I think in terms of this, the election, the biggest thing again, I believe, in spite of the gas prices, the crime, the inflation, I think Wade was very heavily on people's mind, and just the attitude of the mega MAGA group, as you might call. It was just too it was just too much, that people actually saw the attack on the Capitol, and then to hear people deny it like these were just people, excited about visiting the Capitol.
Visiting the capital, absolutely. And you just mentioned inflation, the economy, and all those things. Well, we know that these were global impacts that caused these things to happen. They weren't just things that were here in the United States, but they were attributed to the Dems or to the current president to uh, ensure negativity from the right and from Dems to try to lower the expectations or to lower the chances of us having success in the midterms. So that was
Well,
very telling too.
Well, that is the common, regardless of who's in the White House, whether it's a Republican or Democrat.
Mhm.
Whatever happens, the person in the White House get blamed if it's a good economy, if it's in a bad economy, if you're paying like I did $75 to fill my tank when it's normally $50. The president's always going to get blamed. And regardless of what's happening around the world, here in America, we always blame the president uh, for it, and try not to give the president's credit, because the things I believe that Biden had to do to bring us back from the COVID and all were necessary. And Republicans really attacked them for it. And then you probably saw some of the coverage where they were taking credit when they got back in their districts
Absolutely.
for what has happened. And I think that the infrastructure bill, is going to be probably the greatest thing since Roosevelt um program that he did to bring the economy back.
Absolutely. Uh, there were many election deniers, democracy obstructionists elected than not. I think there were 290, and of that, you know, a large preponderance of them got into office. But those vying for major positions, holding control of the state and its election voting operations in major key swing states was 0-6, which is again a win for democracy.
I think more so than people know, because a lot of what happens at the national level start at the local level.
Yes,
Not only with your local operations in the city, but it's at the state. Where your electoral votes are counted. Where they come out, and it's mostly all states are a little different, but a lot of states controlled by their Secretary of State the elections. Here in Illinois, we have a board of elections, a statewide, and the Secretary of State has nothing to do with elections whatsoever. But it is at that local level that they can really play around with the vote. They can change voting places. They can change drop box rules, locations. I would pay a lot of attention. And here, our coalition really want, local and state elections and then national elections as they come up. But still, even with the national, other than the president, they're all state and local because our congressional districts, are very important.
Absolutely. Well, as you know, there were hundreds of voter intimidation or voter rights changes made to election laws
Oh my gosh, yes.
before this midterm election, which caused taking, was it Georgia, I think, where you can't even give water in line.
Yes, yes.
They could have any person
To
question
assist.
thousands of registrations, whether they know the people or not. Just pick some names and put them put them in a form or whatever the process was. Take them to the voter board and say, "I want to question these people." And the thing that's bothered me the most about the win for Governor Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger is we're giving them a pass because of what they did in the
Oh,
uh, 2020 election, not allowing them to, uh, steal the votes. But what they've done in this election to deny voters, mainly of color or just Democratic or whatever, to be able to vote is just ridiculous.
but
It
they
has,
didn't get a pass. Excuse me, Regina. They didn't get a pass. They're doing what they've done. This is what they've done. Been doing since Reconstruction. They have always Georgia and that whole southern bloc, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, South Carolina, North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah, we're bad.
They have blocked the vote ever since 1870.
I
Well,
understand.
it was the
But when I say
1876.
a pass, I'm not saying didn't happen, hasn't happened before. I'm
Oh no,
saying I hear people, pundits say, oh, Trump was against uh, Kemp and Raffensperger, but they won resoundingly. So they,
mm-mm.
you know, they won
I,
because they stacked the deck for themselves and against those they were running against. Uh,
absolutely don't ever think that they did anything noble, in this election thing. They were looking out for themselves, making sure that they didn't lose, anything. And remember, we still got. I have to give credit to a lot of young people who voted this election. But when you look at the state of Georgia and all of those people, young, old, middle, that have driver's license, and you take their driver's license and check the voter registration list, and they're not there. You got over what was that? Over 1 million people that are yet to register to vote. But the blocking the vote, um, like you take Georgia for instance, and they do Arkansas and all of them. Whenever they see a success, where black or brown people are really moving ahead, they dissect that and see what made them successful. Like in with the Obama election and stuff and re-election, they look at what made that successful, and then they go and that's what they start eroding, taking away.
Well, the
They
same thing is with the mail-in voting. That was a Republican thing until it was so successful during COVID, and then they wanted to do without.
Well, because again, that they did an autopsy. They looked at why were these people so successful,
Right.
and this is what they did, and then they took it out. Because remember, during the Trump administration, his with the head of the post office, they
Get yours.
deliberately dismantled equipment
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
make it even more difficult for people to get their um, mail-in votes, and you should have seen the mess in Chicago when they did it. It wasn't just the ballots that was messed up. They had mail all over the place because of what they did. So it's
The democracy has benefited from the change in posture of the midterms. Normally, the uh, party in control at the time of a midterm is the one voted against, and that didn't happen this time. So the question I have to you is: do you think democracy can stay strong across the nation, regardless to the inconsequential wins of many deniers of non-leadership positions? They
no,
were
I think
governors, secretary of states, or attorney generals. And what do you think we need to do to ensure it does?
what we need is for people who can vote, who's eligible to vote, who believe in the system that the only system that they know, have to participate. Because believe me, people was like democracy won. This was just another one of the battles of people that they were born here in this country, but they really admire the strong man, the strong arm, and a lot of it has to do, Regina, with a lot of super rich people who back this stuff. I mean, they made their money here in America and even abroad, but we have a very fragile uh,
Democracy.
democracy. There's always groups that are looking, and you take like the past president, 45, really admired, loved. I mean, he himself would love to have been one of those strong men. That deny freedom to the citizenry. But I think we're still pretty fragile.
Absolutely. Uh, Democrats won control of the Senate 50 to 49, with the possibility of reaching a 51-49 in the Senate if the
That would be good.
Georgia runoff stays blue as projected. This is just one seat short of the minimum desired to move the democracy agenda forward. It's achieved with the vice president's vote. Question to you: do you think this will make a difference in the Democratic uh, in democracy or the Democrats' ability to move democracy efforts forward? And if so, how? And if not, why not? And do you think Republicans will chip in, help?
Well, no. The answer to that is no. The last question is no. Democracy is being overused, because it's the fact that we can still vote and stuff like that and participate in things, but it's still on some pretty thin ice across this country. But let's talk about the Senate. And you were saying democracy. I just want to move that word out, because the difference that's going to be made here, um, the 50-50 Senate required a whole lot of negotiations, nail biting, people, beating up on the president for not pulling certain strings, cords. I would say rip cords. And then once they, with the 50, came to a decision, then they had the vice president. But with 51, they can move things along a little swifter, because you have the 50 plus one, and if you already have that in your caucus, you can move a lot of legislation and and make a lot of decisions where you couldn't otherwise have done, even when you had the 50-50. It's going to be much easier to work in the Senate. But now, without the House, there's not like bills that have to come from the House to the Senate, or the Senate sending bills to the House. And that's where a little work is going to be needed, depending on what they're trying to accomplish.
I hear you. I hear you.
So those things are still to be considered.
So it's kind of it's really unknown because it's going to be what you see on the ground that actually determines where you go or what you need
It
to.
really is. It really is. And I when I was saying democracy, we're looking at because I think that January 6th was pretty close, and we don't know all that's happening because see a lot of people are upset with the Justice Department, and people are surprised to find out that a lot of people could only be charged with trespass or defacing public property.
Hmm.
There was no real strong laws about what they did, and
Well, that's
that's
the same thing you find with a lot of the laws as we went into the internet and videography stage. You remember, you could have a crime of rape or something like that, but if it was voyeurism or something like that, that wasn't a crime because it wasn't on the books yet. So
yes,
you have to catch up with the state of affairs right now in order to really be able to
to
attack
protect.
the crimes that are occurring.
But
Uh,
but
Go on, please.
but I was just saying that what we saw January 6th, like going back during the Nazi era, how the Nazi Party in America, we there was just so many of sitting senators and representatives that were in cahoots with with the Nazi agenda. From 30, and there was a lot of activity from 32 to 40, even when the America was in the war, was still working because they believed, like you probably heard of the silver shirts, and the
Brown.
Hitler had the brown shirts, we had silver shirts, white shirts, blue shirts. But people that really, they're not happy with the country because they don't feel that it's strong enough. It's got too much color in here. Now that's what's happening right now, is people have started looking up all of a sudden on television. You're seeing all these mixed up looking families and stuff, and people feel like they're being overrun by all this color and all these different people, foreign people, and
But
that's why
they got to
you're
get with the
having such a
program.
strong reaction.
They got to get with the program.
Yeah,
But
and they don't. They don't.
the nationwide exit polls cited inflation at 31%, abortion at 27%, gun policy at 11, crime at 11, and immigration at 10 as issues of most concern for voters. When I looked at that, there were many notable issues not identified in this exit poll, or some lower than I would expect, such as democracy, voting rights, police brutality, gerrymandering districts, to name a few. What do you think? What issues would you consider should have been on the ballot important for voters?
Well, my stuff, what you're saying there, the things that you talked about, would probably never be on a poll, and I get so uh, pretty much down to red and blue. Um, that's almost where I am right now, because of the last term of the last president, and how the whole Republican Party has just absolutely flipped, or I call it lost its mind. So I don't have like right now, whether it's abortion or inflation. I think equal. We're still dealing with, equal rights and criminal justice more so than some of the other things, at least for me.
Criminal
So
justice.
if that wasn't in the polls, that would which would influence me. But right now, just making sure, based on the character and the actions of the senators and representatives representing the Republican Party, was just enough to make sure wherever I could vote or influence voting, that they wouldn't have a chance. And that was my.
True that. True that.
Mhm.
Well, what do you think contributed to the Dems' success in the election? I know you talked a little bit about it. Do you have anything else to add
But
to?
yeah, but I think what you said. I think the Republicans alibiing the January 6th actions, like those were just overexcited tourists. I think a lot of people quietly benefited from some of the actions that Biden made. And I think they just wanted to put a stop to some of the nonsense coming from the MAGA group.
I would agree because I could hear or feel throughout the country, and this is by watching the different news outlets, that America had had enough. We had two distinct parties, and we had some fringe parties, the Independents, Green Party, those kind of people. But you knew that there was the ability for us to have different views, but to be able to talk to each other. And there was no infighting to the sense of physical violence or trying to belittle or any of those things. Well, that has kind of gone by the wayside because in the GOP or the Republicans, the actual Republican National Committee took on the banner of the MAGA Republicans, and so the Republican Party became MAGA.
Oh, it is, no question about it.
Conservatism was lost. Do you ever think they'll get back to having a real Republican Party?
I really don't. I really don't know. I think it's going to probably be a couple of cycles, because it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how this whole run. Because, see, to me, DeSantos is like a mini Trump. I mean, there's nobody on the scene right now in the Republican Party that's even worthy of being, especially in the presidency, but that will even step up to make a change in their party. I mean, people even like a person like maybe Romney or the Mikowski or one of those, but they don't have the courage to take on the onslaught. So right now, Trump has sort of set it up as a bloodbath, and anybody going in will have to, get into that stink to show, the race to the bottom. Who can get to the bottom first to be able to have a position of any order?
But you know that you've mentioned Governor DeSantis, the governor of Florida, several times. His approach to governing, if put on a national scale, would be very much likened to what the MAGA Republicans are doing. And I think he's
That's
maybe
who he
an
is.
offshoot from that, but he got a little more polished. But he is truly ruthless. And what he does in his state, if put on the entire country, would be totally devastating.
Oh, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not trying. I'm just saying that that is where the where the Republicans, because you asked about the party, that's where they are, and it's a race to the bottom. You
Race to
know,
the bottom, absolutely.
yeah, and I don't know whether that will, they might have to go another whole cycle of running to the bottom before they can start. Some other folks can start floating to the top, because I don't see anyone um, worthy of. I just don't see it. Even up here in Illinois, they had. Uh, I mean, they just probably had nobody else to put up, because they put up a super MAGA candidate, Bailey, who didn't go anywhere. A lot of people were upset with Governor Pritzker, the Democratic governor, but they weren't about to vote against him with this guy in the wings. So, and it was really interesting. I don't know whether you heard or saw it nationally. Here in Illinois, the polls closed at 7 o'clock. At 7:15, they declare Pritzker the winner. It
How is that
was,
possible? How is it possible?
but
But
I mean, from what they saw coming, there was just no. I mean, there were literally places where the Bailey was zero. Can you believe that?
what? Never
Yeah,
heard of it before.
no, nobody else had either.
Stranger
I don't
things
know.
have
He
happened, but
he
strange.
probably would have challenged it, but it wasn't going nowhere.
Yeah.
So
Now,
they,
you talked about January 6th. So my next question on whether you followed it is obsolete or is not relevant because you said you had. But do you consider that those hearings they had were beneficial or contributory to the election results? And tell me why.
well, they might have. I thought they were interesting for the people who spoke. Um, to share what they had to share. But I'm not too sure what I'm not too sure whether they actually did contribute to the elections or not.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but they were truly, to me, some of the what was going on in the White House, and the unstableness of the president throwing ketchup on the walls and stuff like that was absolutely shocking.
But that's 45. Okay.
Yeah,
Now, what are your thoughts about Liz Cheney and her performance as deputy chair of the committee and support of democracy in the midterm? She actually backed some of the Democratic candidates as opposed to the MAGA Republican.
right now, Liz Cheney was certainly not anybody that I would have ever voted for, because her daddy, first of all, and she, I would considered ultra conservative. But now, when you're talking about standing up for democracy, she took our conservatism and anything else but put country first.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's
she,
all democracy is country first. It's support of
I'm just saying,
democratic
she,
society, small d. Yeah. But
yeah. The
that's
only thing I'm saying is she did it. She didn't talk about it, but she literally did it, knowing that where she came from, that no way she was going to make it. With that state being a Trump state.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think she knew she had seen the writing on the wall, but for her it
it
was
didn't matter.
very important, right? And I'm sure she talked it over with her family, her dad. I mean, she didn't go out there on a limb by herself, but
But
she knew what was at stake, and she was willing to give that up.
she was willing, because I know her dad told her, because her dad is just a step below MAGA himself. I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan at all, but I do give her kudos.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts about the midterm outcome, our current direction, and what it means to democracy and freedom of choice overall?
Well, again, I just have a problem with the overselling of democracy. Only thing I say about these midterms is that the communities of color and areas, we really need to continue to work, um, you know, to get people registered and educated about voting, and really try to encourage them, because, boy, there's so many people that just do not. I mean, they don't believe in the system, but they're benefiting on the system. I don't, I work in it and been working in it a long time, trying to get people to register and to vote effectively, at the local level, and not just, I mean, making people, uh, care, work for their votes. Don't just because you got a D behind your name, know that it's automatic. You're going to automatically get certain votes. I'm like, no, be a sophisticated voter. So that's where I go from, the midterms, because, I think back how excited people were during the Obama period, but what did it really do for us as a group in terms of our political uh, IQ?
Well, it was just a blip on the map. It
Yeah,
happened and it dropped off. But from my perspective, I think it was underwhelming, his tenure, because he was stifled by the Congress, upper chamber, the Senate, when
oh, he lost
the
both of them
leader
in his.
said, huh?
He lost both in his midterm. I mean, he was there, but
Correct. I'm saying they said, McConnell said, you're not getting anything done. And that's exactly what happened. He would
well,
not let anything get through. He did some
well,
executive
yeah,
orders, but he could not get anything passed.
but he passed the Affordable Act,
He did.
Affordable Cares Act.
He did. He did. He
He
did. But he
did
had to
that,
work
and
his
nobody
magic.
else. That was fantastic.
He had to work his
Um,
magic.
but I'm saying that we need to really, the education, the thing that we and I'm talking about people of color, uh, what we're missing is learning and being sophisticated about the vote. This is the system that in which we live under. We talk about democracy, that's the system we live under. And we need to be a part. We cannot be just, I'm just here traveling through, I'm just traveling through. No, you have a right. Too many people have put it all out there for us to be a part of this. And I think the biggest thing here, this midterm, anything else, is voter education, voter registration in my community,
I hear
and
you.
trying to,
I hear you.
to get people.
I hear you. Is there, I mean, we've talked about a lot and you shared your views on many issues. I mean, we've hit the gamut. Is there anything else you'd like to share with my audience that we've not covered?
Well, we were talking more, mainly about this election that have just passed, but in other conversations is the importance of the political process. See, we just talked about the results of it, but I think politics. A lot of people see it as something negative, but that's how we live. That's what we live by, and and that's in every aspect of our lives. Um, there's always some kind of voting or some decisions that are being made, and I believe we really have to get in and get ourselves involved in making decisions that affect our lives. And the system that's there for that to happen is through the vote. And that's what we really have to start understanding about the vote, and not just being friends with somebody or someone knowing your name, but having the question, knowing what's affecting you, we are affected in every aspect of our lives, but we have to have the questions to ask and make people earn our votes as we go, because most people earn the votes are bought for, because I know you probably heard that $16 billion was spent in this last election,
Uh,
and
I
it's
didn't get the
still
number, but I knew it was a big number, and I did know that did not know it was going to pay people
that it was going to do what?
to pay people. You said people got paid, isn't that what you said?
No, when I was saying paid, I'm talking about the politicians,
Okay.
that
Okay.
the
Legal
politician.
legal things. Uh-huh. I got you. I
Yeah,
got you. But you know that in the bigger scheme of things, all of the things that happen in politics are controllable. We've got to make sure we take that into consideration and we thrive to make sure that we stay in control of what's going on.
and 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 it, and please start where you are. Don't just wait for your presidential or congressional elections. Start right in your community with your precinct captain, your alder
Where the
person.
power is. That's where the power is.
Yes.
Well, I must say, this has been very gratifying to me, and I hope it has been to my audience. But Eleanor, thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to having you on again.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I would love to. There's so much,
For those tuning in today, as always, I appreciate your support and look forward to a time when we can interact with each other. I trust I provided something that enlightened you to the state of our country, and that the dialogue with Ms. Murphy added a benefit which showed a different perspective, but not different facts. Next show, I'll take that deep dive into where it all landed. Hopefully, all results will be in, and share what is known about results, projected outcomes, and impact on the way we do business. Change it or fortify it. Given time, I'll lay out how we start our journey toward the 2024 presidential election. It's never too soon. We've got to start it now. This is Regina Adams saying, see you at the end of the week to give you something to share and take into the rest of your many weeks. Take care. Keep getting it together.